all looking very beautiful today. And while I'm up here, I want to thank all of our wonderful guests today, our members of our community, our larger community, who are here to share with you, and you're going to have a rich day today. You're going to learn a lot and think a lot. And I also want to thank all of you for giving your focused attention and your respect this morning. You've done a great job. Thank you. So you're getting to know me by now, and then I like to start my talks with a quote. This is from Nelson Mandela, an anti-apartheid activist, revolutionary, and the first black president of South Africa. He said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." I think that our keynote speaker, Dr. Sean Eversley Bradwell, would agree with Mr. Mandela wholeheartedly. Mr. Eversley Bradwell has made a professional and personal commitment to creating a world that Dr. King called the beloved community. It's a world in which people commit themselves to working together to solve community problems, no matter how complex, in a fair, democratic, respectful, and nonviolent manner. A passionate educator, he has been teaching at Ithaca College since 2001, where he is a very popular and much admired professor. He teaches courses like Education, Oppression, and Liberation, Hip-Hop Cultures, and Education of African America. Imagine taking courses like that. He is also a member of our school board. I first got to know Mr. Eversley Bradwell when we taught and learned together at the Lehman Alternative Community School. It doesn't matter whether his students are 12 years old or 22. In his classroom, he puts responsibility and ownership on students as much as possible, and you will never hear him talk about teaching without also talking about learning, because he believes the two cannot be separated. Students and teachers teach and learn together and construct knowledge together in the classroom. His goal is to get students to create new ways of thinking about the world. So get ready, hang on to your seats. Mr. Eversley Bradwell is sure to challenge all of us to rethink what we think we know about history and about the world. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sean.
Good morning, folks. Not gonna work. Good morning, folks. That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Let me first begin by asking Mrs. Gutman's class, Ish, Micaiah, Rebecca, and Alexa to stand and have their classmates give them another round of applause for their amazing performances. So please stand and what you did was fantastic. So I'm going to try to do a couple of things today and try to keep my time short to make sure we stay on task. I do teach history. I teach a class on hip-hop as well. And one of the things that I love about teaching about hip-hop is that in some respects people say hip-hop came from nothing, right? It created something from nothing. And for those of you who find yourself at Ithaca College in the near future, please come see me. We can talk more about that class. What that means, though, for me is that we can create the kind of world that we want to create. And I take that seriously. You heard that from Mr. Cal Walker, and I'm going to try to show you a little bit more about what that looks like. So I'm also aware that this year, in 2013, marks the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. The sesquicentennial, as they say, for 150 years. Some of you may know that Cornell University owns a copy, the original, the first copy of the Emancipation Proclamation. It's currently on display at Olin Library, which you see in the corner, which is right by the clock tower. And I encourage you all to go check it out. It's an amazing document to go take a look and read. It's also the semi-centennial, the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, right? And again, you heard Mr. Walker say, while Dr. King is not all of the black experience or black history, and definitely not all of the civil rights movement, he does stand as a symbol for what that movement looked like. And if you have the opportunity in 2013, you can go see the King Memorial. There's a lot of debates about the King Memorial because people thought King looked too angry. He looked too mean. We like to see Dr. King smiling. but I wonder if he would smile at what he sees in 2013 as opposed to 1963. Where do we think we're headed as a country, as a nation, as a world for that matter? And so this monument stands as a reminder for us to think a little bit more deeply. Folks may also know that Dr. King came to Ithaca twice, as a matter of fact. Came in 1961 to give a talk for the Cornell Committee Against Segregation, which means, yes, in Ithaca, New York, there was racial segregation. Black folks couldn't stay in various hotels, couldn't eat at particular restaurants. And so as I was thinking about this semi-centennial of not just of Dr. King's March on Washington and of the Emancipation Proclamation, what I thought would be wise for me to give you a little bit of information about black folks in Ithaca. What's the history, if we're talking about Black History Month, what's the history of black folks in this community, in your community where you find yourselves at? So anytime I begin this kind of history, it's reminding me that we have to begin with the Cayuga Nation, right? Where we stand as Cayuga land. And so while I may buy a house up the road a little bit, I'm very much aware this is part of the Haudenosaunee people. And so I always want to remind ourselves that before we talk about white folks coming or Asian folks coming or black folks coming, we have to talk about the First Nation peoples that were here first. But black folks come with white folks. Black folks come as enslaved Americans. The very first black folks in Tompkins County were enslaved, which means they worked for free. They worked for white folk. And that's important for a couple of reasons, so let me tell you why that's the case. Before I tell you that, let me say when I went to go looking for information about black folks, I was told that I wouldn't find it, that it wouldn't be there. In fact, when I look at some of your textbooks, I'm intrigued, amazed, somewhat dismayed or disappointed at the lack of information on Asian Americans, or black Americans, or Latino Americans, that I would expect more. And so it was interesting for me, because I knew that black folks came early on, but I was told that I couldn't find them in the archives, and I didn't know what that meant. So what I did was go looking for photographs. I love visuals. So I worked with the History Center, and I just started looking at photos. I started finding things like these, which we think is about 1890, and finding black folk. Or Ithaca High School in 1895, and finding black folk. Ithaca High School again in 1903, and finding black folk. The 1920s, sometimes I found black folk, sometimes I found Asian folk, sometimes I found all kinds of people. And so I'm showing you these to say, no matter what your textbooks may tell you, that black folks have been here, right? We have a long history in this community. In the 1880s, and then again in 1886 and 1885, right? And this is Ithaca Central School. How many of you went to BJM by a show of hands? This is your school. In 1886, this is Central School became Beverly J. Martin, right? And so we see that there's been a long history of black folks in Ithaca, New York. So much so that folks have written books about their experience of being enslaved in Ithaca, New York. Peter Wheeler wrote a book in 1839 talking about his experience of being a slave in Tompkins County. Peter Webb is one of the most famous black folks in Ithaca, who also was a slave early on, or was enslaved early on, but did something pretty remarkable. And if we take a look at the work of Sidney Galway, who wrote a paper in 1960, he makes mention of Peter Webb and how Peter Webb ended up buying his freedom. New York State outlawed slavery in 1799, but it doesn't take effect until 1827. And the idea being that you could use or maximize the labor. So even though we pass it in 1799, we don't make it go into effect until 1827, excuse me. But Peter Webb bought his freedom in 1818. He worked out a deal with John Speed, the Speedsville farm, it's near Slaterville Spring, to buy his freedom from his master for $350 plus $34 of interest. He paid $384 for his freedom in 1818, which would be the equivalent today of about $6,000. So in Ithaca, New York, we have not only stories of enslavement, but much more importantly for me, we have stories of freedom, of emancipation, of liberation. So what did Peter Webb do after he bought his freedom? He helped create this. Anybody know what this building is? Yes, the AME Zion Church, St. James AME Zion Church in the Southside community, right? The AME Zion Church is over 180 years old. Let me repeat that again. It's over 180 years old. To my understanding, it's the oldest religious building in Ithaca, right? It's the oldest living religious building in Ithaca. That's impressive. It's one of the oldest black churches in all of the Northeast. So what does this tell us? This tells us that not only there were black folks here, a family gathering in Caroline, New York in 1890, a family reunion, right? Calvary Baptist Church in the 1900s. So the more I went looking for black folks, the more I found black folks. We've been in Ithaca for quite some time. Ithaca College in 1907. Ithaca High School cross-country team in the 1920s. The first black police officer, right, Levi Spalding in 1920. Some of you may know or heard of George A. Johnson, the first black juror in Tompkins County. Also a member of the Underground Railroad as a barber. One of the things that take place on the Underground Railroad, if you're trying to conceal people, if you're trying to hide people, if you're trying to help them get someplace else, barbers became extremely important. Why? Because I can change your appearance. I can make you look different. I can clean you up in essence. And James A. or George A. Johnson is around today. Some of you may know it without even knowing it. That this is the Plain Street Bridge. It's named after George Johnson. Right? So not only have black folks been in Ithaca, black history has been in your life without you possibly even knowing it. So Ithaca is unique for a number of reasons. It's phenomenal for a number of reasons. It has what I say, a place in black American historiography and black American geography. What does that mean? It means that the first black national Greek organization, Alpha Phi Alpha, was founded in Ithaca, New York. It means that those of you who met Alex Haley Poole, Alex Haley is the famed author who wrote not only Roots, but the autobiography of Malcolm X, one of my favorite books of all time. It means that we're the home of the Africana Studies and Research Center, one of the premier places in all of the United States to study black folks. It means that Harriet Tubman had family here and would stop in Ithaca regularly, or that Frederick Douglass gave lectures at the AME Zion Church and gave passionate speeches about freedom and liberty. It means that we have one of the oldest black churches in the country in our community. It means that during the Civil War, we had 26 black men who enlisted to help fight for Northern liberty and Southern reclamation. It means that we have people like Beverly J. Martin. We have people like Dr. Lavelle Brown, one of the youngest superintendents, or the youngest mayor in all of New York State, Savante Merrick. It also means that we have the Cornell Hip Hop Collection. This is just a small sampling of the black history that you have in your community. So, the point of me telling you this stuff is that you're going to hear a number of great presentations today, phenomenal presentations today. And I want you to know that some of these events happened right here in your community. Some of these events are happening right here in your community. So as you go throughout your day, I want you to keep your eyes open. I want you to keep your minds thinking. You will hear about acts of kindness and greatness. You will hear stories of perseverance and possibility. You will hear stories about you, about all of you, and more importantly, about all of us. So I am so blessed that you have this day every year, and I want you all to think a little bit more deeply about the community that you live in, and more importantly, the reason why we need and have a Black History Month. And with that, young folks, have a beautiful day. Thank you very much.